friends. Welcome to episode 221 of School Librarians United. I'm your host, Amy Herman. This podcast is dedicated to the issues and challenges school librarians face every day. As a school librarian finishing my 16th year, I knew I wanted a podcast which addressed the nuts and bolts of running a successful library program. I don't claim to have the answers, but I hope that this is a platform to share resources and exchange ideas. Now is a perfect time to mention that all the ideas and opinions expressed in this podcast by myself, my interview guests, and listeners who reach out to the podcast are our own and do not reflect those of our school districts. When incorporating research, I always make sure to cite my sources. So whether you are a novice or a veteran school librarian, this podcast has something for you. Before we get started, I'd like to make sure to let all our listening community know of the good news we have to share, including congratulating Amy in Kansas, who will start her new elementary library job in August. Amy wrote, "I am in this limbo phase of being hired and not starting in the library until August. Yet my roots are in public library info services, so I want to research all the things in the spirit of being prepared. Your collection of episodes is such a valuable resource. I am always excited to see what's on my Up Next section in my podcast app. Thanks for all the work you put into it. It's incredibly appreciated." I also wanted to wish congratulations to Shannon in Vermont on her new job. I know your new school is so lucky to have you joining their staff. And congratulations to Lori in North Carolina. She's a 23rd year educator who is taking the plunge into library school and stepping into her own elementary library position next school year. I'd like to extend a very special welcome this week to listeners Penny in New Zealand, Carrie in Florida, Natalie and Rhonda in Illinois, Crystal in Maryland, Margaret in Missouri, Kim in New Hampshire, Amanda in Texas, and Rebecca in Washington State. I welcome you and all listeners to reach out with your feedback and episode suggestions. You can reach me either on Facebook, on Twitter. My handle is @LMS_United, or the email address schoollibrariansunited@gmail.com. If you include your mailing address, I'll be sure to send you a podcast sticker. And now for a word from our official sponsor, Capstone. Capstone is an innovative publisher and education technology provider of children's content for school libraries, classrooms, and at-home learning. Home of the award-winning PebbleGo research database, Capstone has a passion for creating inspired learning and intellectual curiosity in children. I am so excited to be working with them. And now in a segment I like to call Why I Love Capstone. Friends, if there is one thing you learn very quickly when you're teaching elementary school, and that is if the word gross is in the title of a book, it is sure to be a hit. And I'm guessing this is probably also true of middle school students as well. But I'll tell you what, Capstone doesn't disappoint because we've got a series right up your alley called Gross History. And if you're a former history teacher, you know this is going to fly off the shelves. So friends, this series came out actually in 2017. It is 6 titles in the series, and I want to read from the copy. From dirt pit bathrooms to homes crawling with critters, life could be pretty disgusting for people long ago. This set takes readers back in times when conditions were very different from today. Engaging text, period photos, and illustrations, and primary source excerpts bring each era to life. And friends, this is the kind of book which gets those readers excited about history. I know that as a history teacher, I always liked learning about long ago, and somehow this really makes it, I don't know, somehow tangible, very real, that when it's very gross, kids are like, okay, now I'm interested. We've got gross facts about pirates, gross facts about the American colonies, gross facts about the Middle Ages, gross facts about the Roman Empire, and gross facts about the U.S. Civil War. And friends, all of these books are going to be in your history section, but like all series, I strongly suggest that when you buy these, you keep them all together because invariably, students who check out one are going to want to read the entire series and to read a little bit more. And I want to pick the one about American colonies because I know when I taught elementary, we were always trying to tie into the history units, which students were learning about in their classes. And in this case, we've got from moldy food and dirt-covered clothes to poisonous pests and extreme weather. American colonists had a dreadful time in the New World. Get ready to explore the nasty side of life in the 13 colonies. And friends, if your elementary students were like mine, they cling to information, these factoids, which they can sort of throw about as currency, whether or not it's at the dinner table or it's at the lunch table. Anytime kids can gross each other out with facts that they know, it gives them a sense of power. It gives them a sense of, I know something that I want to share. And this is one of those things that really excites other students to get reading as well. I'm so grateful to Capstone for their continued commitment to support the podcast in Season 5. They are offering listeners of School Librarians United a very special discount. Visit shop.capstonepub.com and use the code UNITED to get $20 off an order of $100 or more for both print and Capstone interactive ebooks. That's code UNITED for $20 off an order of $100 or more for both print and ebooks on shop.capstonepub.com. And now for our episode, Manga in Libraries, and my conversation with Jillian Rudes. Friends, I'm so excited. Jillian Rudes, welcome back to the podcast.
Thank you for having me back, Amy.
Friends, if you haven't heard Jillian's first episode 148, AASL 21, Getting Involved, I highly recommend it. Jillian gives us step-by-step approaches to just that, getting involved with our organization at the state and the national level, especially for our conference committees. And I have a feeling you're still very involved. Is that right, Jillian?
Yeah, I actually was just elected to ALA Council for the next 3 years.
Jillian, for those who are just meeting you for the first time, what types of roles and responsibilities at the state and national level have you held?
For 5 years, I served on the executive board of the New York City School Librarians Association, last serving as the president. And I've also served as the co-chair of programming and the co-chair of the conference for the AASL National Conference Committee.
It sounds like you are busy nonstop. You know, speaking of nonstop, so April has been something of a blur for you, I have to imagine. I follow you on social media, and I truly, you know, friends, there's always that person you're incredibly jealous of on Twitter. Okay, it's going to be Jillian. You just returned from presenting in Austin at Texas Librarians Association's conference, and before that, you were traveling throughout Japan on a school trip organized by you.
Yes. It was a 9-day trip to Japan. It was absolutely wonderful. And I started actually planning this trip in 2019, but because of the pandemic, we obviously didn't go. And then for a few years, Japan had its borders closed to tourism, but recently opening in the fall, we were finally able to go. So 4 years of planning, 24 students, 4 adults. It was absolutely amazing.
Wow. So back up. How many adult chaperones did you have in addition to you? I think you had another teacher with you.
It was me and 3 other adults.
3 other adults. Perfect. Oh, that sounds wonderful. And, you know, I'm sure the strange thing was that the kids who would have been on part of the original trip are now like out of college, perhaps. I mean, you know, this trip happened, you know, there was such a delay between when the trip was planned, but to sort of connect to what we're talking about today, manga and libraries, the reason why, can you give us an idea why, of all places, were you taking a group of students to Japan?
Yeah, so originally in 2019, when my 8th graders, who are now seniors, it was part of our manga club initiative, and we wanted to give students an opportunity to learn more about Japanese culture and history and art and manga outside of New York City. So our school often took trips, international trips, but usually to Europe. So this was the first international trip to Asia. So a lot of those manga kids, yes, they're in college now, and I have definitely gotten some emails about how sad they were that we finally went and they couldn't go, but hopefully they study abroad or they have a chance to take themselves at some point in their future.
Absolutely. So let's back up and get some context. Would you describe where in the country you work? Tell us about your library, the grades you support, the programs you teach. Actually, we're going to go into a lot of the details about the programs you teach. But, you know, let's hear a little bit about what your day is like when you are at work and not traveling around the world.
Well, I'm a school librarian in Queens, New York City, and I've been a school librarian for 13 years. In my current school, I serve about 1,000 students, grades 6 through 12. And I'm just going to make a comment about manga now. And this is probably the same for maybe your library and everybody's library. But the highest circulating item, I guess, right now is manga. And students come into the library before school, during school, after school, just constantly to circulate manga, to fill their backpacks, to get their reading in. So I guess we're here today to talk about some manga.
Yes. So, I've been so excited to share this conversation ever since I read your book, Manga in Libraries, over spring break. I was not flying around the world. I was flying to Denver to visit our daughter. And I know manga is your wheelhouse, but for listeners who are just now meeting you for the first time, would you give us an idea of just how invested you are in manga? Because Library Journal even called you a manga maven. And oh, by the way, you and I have one thing in common, and that is we are in the same cohort of Library Journal's Mover and Shakers. Woo-hoo. Congratulations. That was us, 2022. Congratulations. We were, I know we were messaging each other when that was all announced. I was like, oh, guess who I see? I think I got my copy before you did. And I'm like, congratulations. And you're like, what? And I was like, taking a picture, and you're like, it's fuzzy, make it a better picture.
Yeah, you
so no,
first.
It was very fun. But yes, you and I and a couple other school librarians sort of represented our corner of the profession as school librarians. But tell us about your passion for manga, because it goes beyond simply, I like to buy manga for my library.
That's true. But I just want to make it clear, some people might already know this, but I didn't grow up reading manga. I really only started getting invested in manga in 2010 when I first became a school librarian, because I noticed that a lot of readers in my school were personally invested in manga. And because as librarians, we want to give readers what they want, I knew there was a lot of educating that I had to do for myself to learn about manga. So I started dabbling in graphic novels, comics, manga, manhwa, and I was using the Yalsa's best graphic novels lists for teens. And this is really how I just started to know what I should be reading, and then it just grew from there. But I started my first manga club in 2014, and then I presented about manga at my first conference in 2016. And then, fast forward, the pandemic started, and I started presenting the Manga in Libraries webinar series, which started to reach the international audience. And then I guess you could say the rest is history, or we'll talk more about that later.
I was going to say, friends, don't worry if all of that seems like a lot, because the wonderful thing is that Jillian has a fantastic website, and I've been scouring it because I am working through a budget myself, and I am taking all the recommendations because you included the book lists from your webinar series. And so it was it clearly organized and run by a librarian, because you knew that librarians listening would want to then purchase the books that were mentioned in the webinar series. And friends, all of these resources are going to be in the show notes because they're all in Jillian's wonderful website. So don't be afraid. And please tell me, before I get in much further, what is manhwa?
Manhwa are Korean comics.
Thank you so much. And this is important to know. We have one of our children is going to Korea for a semester abroad. He's an artist. And so he does a lot of drawing and illustrating. And I don't want to jinx our luck, but at some point he may find himself on the pages of some manhwa, and this would be very, very cool.
That's amazing.
Very, very fun. Yeah.
I'm actually thinking about taking kids on the next trip to Korea. Yeah.
Excellent.
So
Wonderful.
We'll see, in the next few years if that happens.
Well, knowing you, it's going to. So how about that? I think all you've had to do is just put it out there in the ether, and it'll happen.
I hope so.
I'm curious to know know what ignited that spark, because you feel passionately about manga, you love it, you enjoy it yourself, and recognize the value that it serves in your library. But you then took the sort of unconventional step of saying, now I've got to write a book. I've never been inspired in that respect. So I'm curious to know, what does that look like? And what was that sort of light bulb moment for you?
So if you've seen the Manga and Libraries webinar series, you'll know that I interview professionals from all over the world. But because I'm engaging them in a discussion, it limits my ability to share my own personal expertise. And I definitely have a lot of experience with building a manga collection, hosting programs, etc. And I also noticed recently that I started finding a lot of joy in writing again. And I was published in ASL's Knowledge Quest and ALA's book list. And I knew that I wanted to write more about the work that I was doing. So I decided I'm going to bring all of the things that I've been doing with manga to my new reignited spark for writing. And I submitted a book proposal to ALA, and it was approved. But I sat on that book proposal for a couple of months and didn't write anything. And then the summer came around, and I was like, my deadline is September. I should really write something. And I sat down, and I just kind of stared at my laptop, and I was like, how does one write a book? And then I was just like, well, first step, I have to outline. And then I just started going through everything I've been doing over the past 13 years and just started like setting up different sections, my different chapters. And next thing I knew, I had just pages and pages of stuff that I then organized, and I wrote a book. And I wrote that book in 30 days and less than 100 hours, because once I started typing, I couldn't stop. I was bit by the writing bug, and it was just, it was really fun, actually.
Wow. But I have to imagine you were sort of just in that zone that you were just, I hope that at some point you decided to sleep or, eat. I have visions of what they portray writers in that zone, just nonstop, and they don't come out of their rooms for days. But, forgive me, I'm curious if one is listening and wants to write a proposal to ALA to write a book. I'm going with the assumption that ALA is going to give you more than 30 days to write it. What is standard? What is standard if ALA says, yes, you can write a book, what is their expectation in terms of turnaround?
So I think my proposal was accepted in February, and I had said that the summer was going to be a huge time for me to write because obviously with all the things I was doing in school. So we had set the deadline for September so it can get to the editors and the proofreaders to basically go into publication by December and then come out in print sometime, which came out in February. So I guess if you look at the whole cycle, it was about a year. The proposal, the February, and then it came out February 17th. So I think the longest part was actually the editing process, because there's about 4 different editors that have all different jobs. So it was a lot.
I have to imagine that was, you had put together something that was intensely personal. Mm-hmm. This, what you created, then to have somebody send it back and say, make it better. I mean, that had to have been a little hard. Yeah,
it was really mostly grammar. Like they were restructuring some of my sentences and just thinking of maybe better ways to say what I was saying. So it wasn't really like, this isn't working out, you should change it. It was just like, we love what's happening here, maybe elaborate a little more. Or we love this, can you give another example? So it's just helping me to write better, to better inform the reader.
Well, and I think because, forgive me, but I'm assuming the vast majority of people who pick up this book are not going to come at it with the same kind of expertise that you have. And forgive me, but there's a lot of hand-holding in this book, and I am so grateful because I'm an expert in nothing. And so this is where I'm just going to put myself out there and say, until I read your book, I truly was floundering. I now feel better equipped to spend the money that I have in a way that I feel is really I'm being judicious. But I got to tell you, I was pulling up your book lists from your webinar series when I was going through my budget, because I was looking at all the different webinar topics and saying, these are good books to fill in this gap and fill fill in this gap. And so, friends, you'll all see what I'm talking about in just a minute. But, Jillian, you hit the ground running with your introduction. Why manga? It's a sales pitch, which is essential to any librarian who has ever found themselves having to defend the decision to build a manga collection in their library. And I know that a lot of listeners can relate to this because manga isn't something that people have always seen as being an essential part of a collection.
Yeah, I wanted to start the book with the many reasons why manga should be in our library collections, because there's unfortunately a lot of misconceptions about manga. And I felt that an introduction was essential to framing the value of manga and the ideas that will support the importance of manga in our libraries. So I don't want to make it just about the collection, because manga is so much more than just the collection.
Well, and friends, I don't know if I'm dating myself. Anyway, when I was going through this book, I envisioned Stefan from SNL, who was talking about, and then it is this, and then it was this, and then it is this. And it was like, all of a sudden it was like, and then there's DEI, and then there's SEL, and then there's LGBTQIA, and then there's BIPOC. And then, all of a sudden manga could be everything to everyone. And you just have to know where to find it. You have to know what it's called. It's there. It has everything. It's got. And I was like, it was funny because I'm on the airplane and there's only so much theatrics you can perform while you're sitting in coach. And and I was reading it and I was very excited because, you and I had talked about this episode and I asked if you'd like to be on this. And I'm so excited because I had been holding on to your book and I read it with the idea, this is another question. This is another question. And I did post a picture of all my Post-it notes on here because that's how I know I've done an episode on a book. So, I was incredibly appreciative of chapter 1 because, again, it's this hand-holding that so many librarians are willing to admit we need. And I have so many questions when it comes to manga. I'm afraid to ask. I've clearly gotten over the fact that I don't know much about manga. So thank you very much for going with the assumption that chapter 1, everyone is going to glean something from it. And some of us are just going to drink it in because it's all new to us.
Yeah, it really depends on the level you're at. And that's the thing about the book is it's for someone who knows nothing about manga. It's for someone who knows a little bit about manga. And it's even for the people that know a lot about manga. Because I had done a workshop at YALSA. And one of the librarians in the audience, he was a lifelong manga reader, and he had come up to me at the end, and he said, you know what? I've never in my career ever thought about the social-emotional connection to manga. And it's like, see? So there really is something for everybody in this book, no matter what level of expertise you have. And in chapter 1, I really wanted to focus on a lot of things to give people just this whole idea about manga. So I focus on the history and globalization of manga, understanding the medium itself and how to read it, the readerships, the genres, the publishers, the age ratings, the content warnings, really just everything that you could need to know when building your manga collection or creating programming or lessons or book clubs. But fun fact, I also worked with ALA to create some additional resources aside from my book. And you'll see in the next ALA catalog that there will be Manga in Libraries bookmarks and posters available for your library. So you can use these for an advocacy tool for manga in your library or resources for your readers. So that's going to be fun.
It's like, but wait, there's more. It's like it's like the Ginsu knife commercial. But wait, there's more. There's going to be posters. And, I love that you mentioned the genres because I think there's been so much emphasis in my podcast on all the different genres and how important it is to fill out our collection with genres that speak to our students' interests and their different reading preferences. I didn't appreciate that in manga, they have their own genres as well. And to me, this is like, wait, it's like, it's its own library in there. You've got like the genreification of manga. I was like, wait, it was very meta. Like, here we go. We've got the manga collection, and then we're going to have to genreify our manga collection. I was like, I don't know if that's going to happen. idea, if you will, just let's take a break. As somebody who has felt passionately and committed to building a manga collection, if I walked into your library, what would I see when I looked at, I imagine it's a wall of manga? I mean, what does one see if I walk into your space because you are somebody who celebrates this format?
So I have 15 bookcases of manga, which I think have 5 or 6 shelves on each bookcase. And I could use more room, but that's all I get. So, because I already kind of pushed other collections, to make room for all the manga. And I recently purchased from Demco the alphabet dividers, because I did alphabetize my manga collection. It was the easiest way for kids to find the manga they're looking for, because they don't know the mangaka, they don't know the creator, they just know the title. So I have the alphabet dividers from Demco that also help. So when kids walk right up, they don't have to look into the shelf to find where B starts or where G starts. They just grab that divider. So I recommend that for anyone with a large collection they need to alphabetize.
And they're alphabetized by series title, not by book title? Series
title. Yeah, which series are usually the book title. It's just alphabetized by the series title and then volume number.
And so it's the volume that has the different name. Got it. Okay, all right. No, I mean, I've seen some people do they'll use the image, and then next to the image they'll have those books, and I don't have enough to warrant that much space, and I'm really hoping to sort of do a not only transform our shelf configuration, but I'm hoping to do this, and hopefully my school will not notice all of the 2002 books which are not going to be returning to the bookshelf. When you are dealing with a collection like mine, it's going to go through a transformation, all for the better. I think my regret right now, especially after having read your book, is I didn't save as much as I should have to spend on manga. Mm-hmm. And is it possible? Can you share with us what percentage of your annual budget, or is this something you do not want to disclose?
I could share. Well, first I wanted to say something about those beautiful dividers that I've seen on social media, that people have this series title and they separate it. I have about 250 to 300 different series in my library, so I think they're gorgeous, and I definitely would love to spice up my area with some more graphics, but I think those dividers I wouldn't be able to do. But I've definitely seen some people collage, use broken up manga to collage and create art and stuff. So I can think, or some dynamic shelving with some of my manga titles. But
sure,
my budget for the library. So at my school, we usually get a certain amount per kid. So my principals actually gave me $20,000 this year on top of my budget. So most of it is for the graphic medium, because that is what's checking out. So YA fiction, realistic fiction, fantasy, and then popular nonfiction. I do have an SEL collection. I have a Japanese culture nonfiction collection, but a lot of it does go to graphic novels, comics, manga, and now I'm collecting a lot of manhwa.
We can't ignore the current political climate, the weaponizing of these book bans. And I've got Post-it notes all over your book, including pages 28, 29, and 30 about challenges. So let's spend a little bit of time, because I think that there are some listeners who are like, hey, I'm on board, but what am I going to do when somebody comes after me about the manga that's on my shelves? So let's first of all break it down. Why is manga oftentimes a target when people are looking to criticize your collection?
So manga, because it's a visual medium, and we see that all visual mediums are usually a target of challenges firsthand. Unfortunately, there's many reasons for this, all different reasons, but sometimes it's that the manga's too graphic, it's violent, it's sexual, and that's what leads challengers to remove manga from libraries. But we know that that's not entirely the case. So as librarians, we need to continue to work together to demystify manga for parents, admin, teachers, even kids, other librarians, and show its value for readers.
So what advice would you give to a librarian who's hoping to prevent the challenges from happening in the first place? I'm committed to buying manga. I'm not looking forward to the challenge, but what advice would you give to somebody like me now that I'm going to be really bumping up the collection considerably? How do we prevent these challenges from happening?
Well, there's a couple of things, but there really is no one answer because every library and every community is completely different. So there needs to be some sort of local resources because how I would handle something in New York City might be completely different from another state. But librarians do need to know what is in their collections, like first and foremost. So I know I'm a little extra, but I do have a spreadsheet of all the manga in my collection, so by series. And I do read a lot of manga, so I put any notes that I think, is this something that might get questioned at some point? So if there's some profanity or a little gore or violence, I usually add that to my notes. Viz Media is also really good. They have content warnings in all of their manga. So if you're purchasing manga, you can see it in the ebook. You can also see it in the print book, the content warnings or the parental advisory. And that usually also helps you. So you know what's in your collection. Not saying that, you need a collection that's minus violence or minus sexuality, because sexuality and violence are a part of growing up and a part of life. And it's important that teens have the opportunity to see this, think about it, reflect, even have a conversation with someone about it. But just making sure that you know your community really well and that the books that you are buying do actually meet the needs of your community. And then just learn about manga and continue to advocate for readers' right to read. And I think you're a good step ahead.
So I wanted to ask you, because you mentioned that you support students grades 6 through 12. Mm-hmm. So friends, that is going to be 12-year-olds to 18-year-olds. Yep. For those of us listening outside the United States, we're talking about secondary school. What have you done, if anything, about the idea that you have those middle school students engaging with a collection that is designed, and let me just ask you, the collection is 6 through 12. Mm-hmm. And so how have you addressed perhaps concerns that people might have regarding some of the YA content, the adult content, the mature themes, which sometimes I saw when I was going through some titles, it says mature themes. What have you done, especially when it comes to dealing with, say, your 6th and your 7th and your 8th grade readers, when it comes to also engaging with a collection that's designed with 17 and 18-year-olds in mind?
Yeah, so it's super tricky, to be honest, but my entire library is technically just one open space for kids 6 through 12. So that's the nonfiction section, that's the fiction section, and the same goes for the graphic mediums. But I have to be really careful about the older teen titles that I buy. And that's unfortunate for some of my high schoolers because they want this, that, and the other thing. And I always have to have a conversation with them that, we share this space with younger readers. We want to make sure that this is a comfortable, safe space for everybody. So I do purchase a lot of titles on Sora, and that could be blocked off to readers that are older age, so like juniors and seniors. I've definitely had students that were like, you should get a locked case and just put the titles in there. I'm like, no, that seems a little extra. But the only the way that I can do it is I order a lot of titles for all ages readers, so stuff I would put in elementary school maybe for 8+, 10+, because that's also engaging for the 11-year-olds. And then I have the teen titles and then some older teen titles.
Right. All right. Well, and again, you also have established your professional reputation with your families, and I'm sure that these are conversations which, when they need to happen, I'm sure that people understand that the decisions that you made on which titles to purchase. And again, ultimately what this comes down to is families are having conversations with their own children when it comes to making choices about the books they pick out from the library when their families aren't there. And ultimately having those conversations with their parents.
Yeah, I get 2 things from parents. Either A, this is amazing. My kid brings home new books every night and they're really excited about reading. And I have to like go in and they're under their covers with a flashlight and I have to put them to bed, right? So there's like that thread. The parents like don't care what they're reading as long as the reading is happening. They trust that I made good decisions for the collection. But then I have parents that misunderstand manga and they're like, why is my child only reading manga? I would like them to read like real books or other books or more challenging books. And then that's where I have to, start a conversation. And that also comes from teachers too. Like so-and-so is always reading manga in class. He should really be reading blah, blah, blah. Can you hold on to his manga when he comes to class so he doesn't? I'm like, no. I'm just going to let kids read wherever, whenever. Mm-hmm. How are his grades? He's doing his work. He's paying attention. We're good. Let him read. Let the kids read.
I have to imagine that with your reputation in your building, you've been there now for a while. They have to know that you are not some nefarious, book witch who's trying to, you're trying. I think if the worst thing that happens is that the kids are excited about reading, and like you said, they're going through the book so quickly, they're coming in and out. Your circ stats must be just out of this world. I really have to imagine that once these educators get a sense of why you are so motivated, and friends, we're going to talk more about all the things that manga can be to our students. And I that is something that Jillian's book has done such an exceptional job of spelling out how manga has been able to address so many of the needs our students have, especially post-pandemic, and moving forward. I'm so grateful that you're here. Chapter 3 discusses DEI in manga, and librarians everywhere have strived to have diversity, equity, and inclusion in our collections, and our manga collections are no different. I believe this is a popular topic of your workshops and the presentations that you give.
Yeah, this topic is definitely one that I'm most passionate about, alongside social-emotional learning in manga. And diverse and inclusive representation in manga matters, of course, to our readers, but also to our communities. So in my book, the chapter Representation in Manga allowed me to interview professionals from the field that have a close connection to some specific topics in manga, which include representation of the LGBTQ+, girls and women, disability, and BIPOC communities. And these professionals discuss the importance of having relevant and relatable manga stories in our library collections. They also provide resources to help us build our knowledge and some recommended manga titles to add to our collections.
Well, and that is also, am I correct, in our appendices? We have some book recommendations. Yes. So, friends, the wonderful thing, and we're going to talk about this, in the Appendix B are your book lists. And so when the book titles come up in Jillian's book, you can then go and look in the appendix and just start spending money across the board. And it really is, because you talk about how manga, in being able to address the experiences the characters are have, in many cases mirror the experiences that our students have. Mm-hmm. It really is. It isn't hard for them to see that mirror when students are reading manga. Not only mirrors, but also sliding glass doors, because they're invited to go and experience this from the characters, perspective. And the fact is, like you said, the kids are inhaling these books, and it seems like your students are less discriminating about the characters. They're very attached to, obviously, the series, and they become very, enamored with the storylines. But the storylines, I'm sure, divert in many ways and start to incorporate more, like you were saying, BIPOC characters and LGBTQIA and, this is a wonderful way for students to find themselves reading about other people's experiences and other characters' experiences, perhaps unintentionally.
And experiences that reflect their own experiences. So
absolutely.
A lot of readers are connecting to the stories of the characters in manga, and they like to follow them on their journey. So through all their struggles, all their successes. So I think that's what keeps kids connected to a story, is the character.
Well, and I was reading a lot of the summaries and sort of storylines, and almost across the board, these characters are in the same age range as your readers. So, you've got students who are reading about characters who happen to be in middle school or high school, and they are being able to identify with these characters and all the extraordinary things that they do. But again, they are the same age, and therefore there are many emotional, sort of the sort of roller coaster of being a teenager is reflected in the characters as they are also experiencing their teenage years.
Yeah, so when I'm building my collection, aside from thinking about the representation in the manga, I'm also thinking about how is this manga going to foster the social emotional development of a reader. So social emotional learning is definitely at the core really of all the work that I'm doing with teens and manga. And I use Castle's 5 fundamentals of SEL, which are self-awareness, self-management, social awareness, relationship skills, and responsible decision-making. And I use this framework to design my manga lessons, my programs, my discussion questions, and the collection that I have in my library. I also have a nonfiction social emotional learning collection that aligns with the manga collection, and they're right by each other in the library. Because reading manga, as you were saying, helps teens to not only explore the identities and the stories and the experiences of the characters, but helps them to explore their own identities, build their emotional intelligence, and develop their social emotional well-being. I also teach a 12th grade class. It's a Japanese visual storytelling class, and we focus on social emotional learning and manga. So we read all different manga through the lens of social emotional learning and think about how does the protagonist grow throughout the story, and how can the reader also grow throughout the story? So SEL is definitely at the heart of the work that I'm doing with manga.
Can I just ask, you teach a course, but it's called Japanese Visual Language, is that correct?
Japanese visual storytelling.
See, I almost got it. Japanese visual storytelling. And, the wonderful thing about this is that the students, did all of your students who took your course go to Japan?
Nope. So last year when I taught the course, a lot of them were supposed to go with me to Japan, but we ended up having to cancel the trip for the second time, so they didn't get to go. And unfortunately, just because the trip has been so many years in the work, that a lot of students missed the opportunity to go. So they want me to go back to Japan again, which I have no problem doing in a few years. But I want to give at least, a couple of years in between. So some of the middle schoolers who wanted to go will be in high school before I run the next trip to Japan.
Absolutely. And can I just ask, is that course like an elective? Are you part of the ELA team when you teach it? Do the kids come into the library for this class? I mean, I'm just really trying to envision. Do you have do you teach 2 semesters of this class, or is it 1 semester? I mean, I'm just trying to envision, you're a librarian, but you're also a teacher.
Yes, we are. Well, I was an English teacher actually before I became a librarian, so I do have the teaching with English master's and teaching license. So last year, a lot of students took my course because they needed some English credits to graduate. But this year, it's just an elective. There's about 10 electives that are offered every senior year. I only teach my elective in the spring because I usually host Mel's Comic-Con in the fall, and it's just a lot going on. And I called it Japanese visual storytelling originally because my principals were nervous about having a class just titled Manga on the transcript. They thought that people wouldn't really understand the course and its rigor. So we changed it to Japanese visual storytelling, which is awesome because it allowed me this year to incorporate some anime and some films. So we watched Your Name and Weathering with You, and we're going on a trip next week to see the new film. I think it's Suzume by the same creator. So it opened up a lot of things for us.
Well, sure. And I imagine that the more you teach it, it's going to evolve, and you're going to, every time you teach it, it's going to become more and more rich with experiences and different media that you can introduce to enrich your students' understanding. So, friends, the wonderful thing is I failed to realize an amazing resource which Jillian has been responsible for for creating, and that is this webinar series. And you go into detail in your appendices. In Appendix A, you talk about this webinar series. And the wonderful thing is, friends, it's all on your website. And friends, I was watching some of your webinar, and you have 12 webinars, and I'm hoping that you can describe them, because friends, you're going to want to do this deep dive like I did into Jillian's website. And I linked it in the show notes. It's mangainlibraries.com. And the webinar tab, you had 12 webinars. Can you give us an idea of the vision that you had and how this all came together? Because listeners have an opportunity to watch these webinars, obviously for free, on your website.
The Manga and Libraries webinar series was awesome to do. We do have the 12. The last one was streamed in September. I haven't done any since, because with the editing of the book and putting out the book, that really took up most of my time the last few months. But we started with a Why Manga webinar because librarians were asking a lot of questions about manga, what it is, why we should be collecting it, how do we collect it. And I just thought that this was the easiest way to get all those questions answered. And then we started moving into some really specific topics because we were getting really specific questions about the representation of girls and women in manga, and how to host manga and anime programming in your library, and how do we defend the collection? How do we support all our learners, our ENL learners, our language learners, all our advanced learners? We also talked about different communities and their connection to manga. So the LGBTQ community, the BIPOC community, the disability visibility. We also talk about social emotional learning and teaching with manga. So each of these webinars have different experts who come with their own professional expertise to just balance this conversation. It's usually 6 or 7 questions that I ask them, and they all share their different perspectives. And then they created that resource list and the book list, which can also be found on the website.
Well, and again, this right here, this was my deep dive. I was like, I want to watch every single one of these webinars. I want to look at all of the resources. And again, I had them open while I was shopping because I wanted to make sure that the purchases I was making today were reflective of my students and their identities and experiences. So I love that about your book, because you include in the appendix, you include the book list as well as discussion questions, which you can ask in conjunction with each of these webinars that you offer. And it really does seem like this is a way that our listeners can participate on some level with this really deep dive, and how this sort of all came together conceptually. Your book just sort of flows from one topic to the next to the next. So friends, in addition to checking out all the webinars, which were organized by Jillian, do make sure that you also take a look. There is a lists webpage, and this is really fun because this helped me tremendously. Do you want to tell us a little bit about how these lists came about?
Yeah, so we have the 12 lists from the webinars, and they're organized through Anime Planet. So when you open it up, you see the book cover, you see a little blurb, you might see some themes and age ratings, and that will give you a little context to the book. And I also have on the top of the lists page 3 lists that I update weekly. So there's a list for all ages manga, a list for teens, and a list for older teens. So this way you can think about the population you serve and see generally all the manga that I would recommend, that I've read myself, that I have in my collection, that I would recommend for anybody's collection. And the all ages manga is really in there for elementary school or even middle school, because it's all ages, or 8+ or 10+.
Well, and I love this Anime Planet because it was a really nice, intuitive website for me to be able to go through. Again, I was spending money, and I was looking at Jillian's recommendations because really, friends, I'm such a I have two things going against me. Number one, I never have enough money. And number two, being able to sort of scratch the surface and build out my manga collection. I also worked with Sara Smith's graphic library website. And listeners, we have had Sara Smith on the show several times and reference her graphic library resource because she does those deep sort of critical looks at the manga. And the one thing I love about it is that she's looking at them through librarian eyes. She's tagged all of these books with the grade levels or the themes or the different kinds of manga that these books represent. And so when you're looking specifically for different types of manga, you can sort by tags. I know that's really one fun thing with Sara Smith's website that I use a lot.
Yeah, thank you for bringing up Sara. She's definitely a number one resource that I recommend. So she actually has a spotlight interview in my book in the collection development chapter, and she talks about the graphic library. And I recommend Sara's because I don't do book reviews. I just do the webinars and professional development and some recommendation lists. So if you go on my lists and you find something that you're interested in, you can always check out Sara's website to get that deep dive review that Amy was talking about. So Sara is definitely a place to go if you're looking for some manga reviews or if you need a manga review to defend your purchasing decisions.
Well, and that was something Sara said was that, here's the problem is that in so many cases you have to have professional reviews of a book in order to justify buying it. And she was finding a lack of professional reviews. So she was publishing these reviews. And friends, you have to know that, I was on the plane at 30,000 feet when I was reading about Sara Smith on page 26. And I know she's in the book because you invited her to be in the book. And she gives, Sara Smith is here in chapter 2, an interview with Sara Smith. And she's been on the show twice. And the funny thing about Sara Smith, she is, and I'll never forget, episode 100 and episode 200.
Oh, really?
And it was very intentional. It was very intentional. But we're at 30,000 feet, and I'm reading here in Sara's bio, she's appeared on the podcast School Librarians United. And I was like, ah! I was like, Sara Smith mentioned me in Jillian's book. So yes, friends, my ego
Sharing resources.
Exactly. And librarians are all about resources. And friends, that's one of the fun things about Jillian's book is that I feel that much more confident moving forward. Yes. Am I faking it a little bit? Yes, I am. But I think as librarians, when we know where to find resources like Sara Smith's graphic library website and like Jillian's website, Manga in Libraries, and your book, Manga in Libraries, and we're apparently going to have posters and bookmarks. So,
Manga in libraries everywhere.
Exactly. So, I want to ask you, listeners are going to want to follow you. If they aren't already, let us know how we can learn more about you and how we can reach out to perhaps work with you in the future.
Yeah, I just wanted to share that since last year, I've been traveling across the country hosting 3-hour workshops for librarians about manga. So maybe one will be headed your way and you can join me. At the end of May, I'll also be hosting a webinar with Library Journal, and I'll be at ALA. If you're going to be at ALA, I am moderating a panel, Manga Connects to BIPOC Teens. I also have a lot of announcements that I'll be making over the summer, and keeping these a secret has been so hard, but I could do it. It'll definitely be worth the wait. But in the meantime, you can make sure to read some manga or follow me on Twitter at JRLibrarian, check out my website at mangainlibraries.com, or get your hands on my book, Manga in Libraries, A Guide for Teen Librarians. If you have any questions, you can email me at mangainlibraries@gmail.com.
Well, and friends, we have a first for the show. Never before have we had an offer from a guest who's going to give away one of her books. And Jillian, you're going to tell us what listeners have to do to make themselves eligible for a possible free copy of your book.
Yeah, so once this podcast goes live, if you tweet quotes from the podcast on Twitter, we're going to add the handles that you should add into the show notes. You can enter yourself for a chance to win a free copy of Manga in Libraries, A Guide for Teen Librarians. And the winner will be announced on Friday, May 5th.
So, friends, if you're listening to this episode after May 5th, I am very sorry, but we have already found ourselves a winner. But we are going to put the Twitter handles in the show notes. And friends, this is going to be on Twitter. It is not going to be on Instagram or on Facebook. So definitely take a look at the show notes, and we will have instructions on what you need to put out in a tweet to make yourself eligible. And as Jillian said, the winner will be announced on May 5th on Twitter. And friends, so do make sure that you make time for the show notes, both to learn how you can be eligible for that free giveaway, as well as the deep dives that Jillian has so graciously and generously put in our show notes today. Jillian, I am so grateful that you were able to spend some time with us, especially because you are coming hot off of a trip from, you were at Texas Library Association, you were in Japan, you were doing workshops, but I hope that you have some time set aside for yourself in the next few weeks or so.
Yeah, May will be. I'm cool for a little bit until ALA. So May and June, I'll be chilling a little bit.
And I'll see you in Chicago.
Yes,
I'll see you in Chicago for ALA.
Awesome.
Oh, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you, Amy.
Friends, you never want to miss the show notes for each of our episodes, and this one especially because in this case, we've got our very first giveaway. Tweet quotes from this podcast on Twitter for your chance to win a free copy of Manga in Libraries, a guide for teen librarians. Please include @JRLibrarian, @LMS_United, and use the hashtag Manga in Libraries. And friends, a winner will be selected on Friday, May 5th. If you found this episode helpful, please share it out with your team, your PLN, and on social media. Be sure to follow on your favorite podcatcher so you'll never miss an episode. And if you really like listening today, consider leaving a review wherever you listen to podcasts. Reviews help others find us. One last friendly reminder, friends, I encourage you to take advantage of Capstone's generous $20 discount off an order of $100 or more using the code UNITED. The topic of our next episode will be Tables Are Turned and my conversation with Penny Walsh. I hope you will tune in.